Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Some news just in. Cambridge Analytica, the data firm, is to close down. The company at the centre of the controversy over the misuse of Facebook data has lost multiple clients in recent weeks following a major undercover investigation by this programme. I'm joined by our business editor, Siobhan Kennedy, and from the US by our Washington correspondent, Kylie Morris. Well, tell us the story.
Well, a dramatic twist tonight, John, in this story of Cambridge Analytica. This is the company, the political consultancy that this programme published a series of reports on with undercover footage of its chief executive, Alexander Nix, boasting about the use of honey traps, dirty tricks, potentially bribes for use in its political campaigning to entrap politicians. Well, he was suspended by the company. The weeks have passed now. They've been firefighting on a daily basis. Tonight, as you say, this dramatic news that the company is putting all its operations here in the UK into administration. Soon to be followed, we are told, in the US, in New York, by a bankruptcy proceeding for its operations there. Let me read to you from the statement that has literally come out within the last 10 minutes. Over the past several months, Cambridge Analytica has been the subject of numerous unfounded accusations. Despite the company's efforts to correct the record, it has been vilified for activities that it says are not only legal, John, but also widely accepted as a standard component of online advertising in both the political and commercial arenas. Now, as part of its defence, it had commissioned an independent QC. They are saying tonight that that report by QC Julian Mallins will be published. It will show, John, that he has concluded that the allegations, those unfounded allegations, it says, were not borne out by the facts. That report is due to be published later on this evening. Cambridge Analytica goes on to say in this statement that despite its unwavering confidence that its employees have acted ethically and lawfully, that view is supported in the report, but the siege, it says, of media coverage has driven away virtually all the company's customers
well, Siobhan,
and
I think we
suppliers.
get which way this thing is sort of unfolding. Let's go straight over to Kylie in Washington. Kylie, it was an even bigger story in America than it was here. What's the reaction there?
Well, we're still getting the news, to be honest, John, so we don't have any immediate reaction. But I think certainly not only our reporting, but also that of the New York Times and the Observer, gained real purchase here. Of course, we saw Mark Zuckerberg ultimately coming to appear before a committee in Congress, 2 committees in Congress, and there was a desire for continued scrutiny of Cambridge Analytica. Still on the Hill, they're waiting for Alexander Nix to turn up for yet another committee hearing so they can ask him more questions about the way in which Cambridge Analytica conducted itself. I think the real problem going forward, though, for the company was how to attract new business and new clients, given the way in which things had developed, what we'd learned about the way in which they operate. And with the suggestion from the Trump campaign for 2020 that they were no longer going to be using Cambridge Analytica, it really became difficult to imagine who would be bringing Cambridge Analytica on to help them in their political campaigns going forward.
Kylie Morris in Washington. And now back now to the breaking news that the data firm Cambridge Analytica is to shut down. The company was at the very centre of the controversy over the misuse of Facebook data and has lost multiple clients in recent weeks. It was also the subject of a major undercover investigation by this programme. We're joined by our business editor, Siobhan Kennedy, and from the US by our Washington correspondent, Kylie Morris. And in many ways, they hung themselves through their own mouths during that sting.
Well, John, yeah, viewers will remember Alexander Nix, the chief executive of Cambridge Analytica, bragging, boasting about using honey traps, potentially using bribes, all sorts of dirty entrapment tricks to try and catch out political opponents as part of their political campaigning in places like Kenya, Nigeria, all around the world. Well, tonight, a dramatic end to that company. He was forced to step aside. He was suspended several weeks ago. Today, they have said that they are in administration in the UK here. And in the US, they are filing any minute now for bankruptcy proceedings.
Well, let's go over to Kylie, because, of course, The huge thing in the United States was the idea that Donald Trump is only president thanks to Cambridge Analytica. That's putting it a bit broadly, but I mean, it's possible.
That is something that they've rejected, John, here. Of course, the Trump digital campaign says that they weren't using any of the material that was harvested from those Facebook accounts, those 83 million Facebook accounts by Cambridge Analytica. But Cambridge Analytica did play a very significant role, certainly in the final stages of the election here. And they were, you know, instrumental in the digital campaign, the very successful digital campaign that pushed ads out via Facebook to persuade voters to support Donald Trump. Having said that, I think it is this whole question of political advertising that really ensnared Cambridge Analytica here. The suggestion that you could put an identity, put a face even, to the kind of bad actors that everyone was fearful of here, people who may have been manipulating American democracy.
And of course,
that is the way in which they came to be viewed here.
We also learned, of course, that 87 million people's profiles on Facebook were absolutely structural to the way in which all this unfolded.
Exactly, and I think that, you know, the astonishing appearance of Mark Zuckerberg, the CEO of Facebook, who'd avoided ever appearing before Congress until this moment. You know, he was hauled before Congress with some very angry kind of congressmen and senators demanding to know how was this possible. It really ignited a debate here about privacy. I spoke to people whose data was harvested and they were horrified and shocked by the idea that a political company, a political campaign could build a psychological profile of them on the basis of Facebook likes. So I think it took something that felt like it was something that existed, you know, belonged to the pages of 1984 of George Orwell. Suddenly it was kind of rendered real through this issue and through the reporting around it. And I think that's where Cambridge Analytica kind of brought that fiction into being. And that's the price, in a way, that the company has paid.
Well, Kylie Morris in Washington, and here, well, that's it, isn't it? I mean, we're not going to hear any more of Cambridge Analytica except through the law courts.
We will hear from their independent counsel that they commissioned to do a report about all that Facebook data. They say, though, that all these allegations were not borne out by the facts.
Now, the British company at the centre of the Facebook privacy scandal, Cambridge Analytica, is to file for insolvency in the UK and the US. The firm, which has denied using data improperly obtained from Facebook to make targeted political adverts, said its business was no longer viable. Our media editor, Amal Rajan, has more details.
It sold itself as the pioneer of a new kind of digital marketing, able to give companies and political campaigns unprecedented control over their message. But tonight, Cambridge Analytica bowed to the inevitable. The company, which denies any wrongdoing, received the data of some 87 million Facebook users via an app developer. It was the harvesting of that data which ultimately caused its undoing. But there has been additional public interest because of the boasts made by the company. In undercover filming for Channel 4 News, its most senior figures claimed they could decisively influence elections. In recent months, scrutiny of the company's practices has been remorseless. The London offices were raided by the Information Commissioner.
People see the work that we did in a negative light.
Its suave CEO, Alexander Nix, stepped down not long after a grilling by the Culture, Media and Sport Select Committee. Tonight, the committee's chairman said this wasn't the end of the matter.
We've got to make sure that this is not an attempt to run and hide, that these companies aren't closing down to try and avoid being rigorously investigated for the allegations that have been made against them about the way they've used data, the ethics and the legality of their practices. Those investigations have to continue. We have to know what happened.
In a statement, Cambridge Analytica said the scandal had driven away virtually all customers and suppliers, leaving the company no longer viable and now entering administration. Fallout from the controversy is global and ongoing. The founder and CEO of Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg, apologised in Washington last month for his company's failure to control the British firm.
We didn't take a broad enough view of our responsibility, and that was a big mistake. And it was my mistake, and I'm sorry.
Many analysts believe this scandal will have a lasting impact.
This whole affair has changed people's perceptions of social media. We've drifted into the way that we use these tools without really a clear understanding of how that data is used and how we are targeted by advertisers. So this affair has helped to bring it front of mind for a lot of people and make people much more mindful about what they share.
The company says it will honour its obligations to staff, but regulators on both sides of the Atlantic still think it has questions to answer.
And Amol is with me. Can we ask a direct question, Amol? Is this really the end of Cambridge Analytica?
I suspect not, Hugh. I mean, there is an irony, isn't there, in the fact that this company, which boasted about being masters of media manipulation and modern messaging, should go under whilst claiming to be under siege from the media. Hugh, Cambridge Analytica was essentially just a modern ad agency with a very slick front man and extremely rich backers. But it did have an outsized influence on the zeitgeist for, I think, two reasons. The first is that it was clearly involved in a number of elections, including that of President Trump, which was a tight election. And the second is that this harvesting of 87 million users' data was, I think, really the moment in modern history where millions of people wised up to the fact that their personal data is now the most valuable commodity in the world. But to answer your question directly, don't be surprised if elements of this company spring up under a different guise, under a different label, because the fact is the brand Cambridge Analytica might be toxic, but demand for the data and the techniques they use to become briefly very notorious hasn't gone away. In fact, it's growing by the day.
Amol, once again, thanks very much. Amol Rajan, our media editor.